Right, so hopefully we should be live any moment now. Just waiting for YouTube to tell me if it's working or not. So, there you go. Finally, it says you're live. Excellent. This is good. Well, hi everybody. I still think we have about a minute or so before the official start time begins. But if anyone is in the chat and you could let me know if you can see me or hear me, okay, that would be great. Just so I know, mostly for my own benefit. But yeah, we will be starting very soon. I think my phone says that I have like 30 seconds, if so. So we will be just starting with the Q&A shortly. But thank you so much for joining us. And sorry, it is at a quite inconvenient time on a quite inconvenient day. I do appreciate it is Boxing Day in the UK and probably in some other parts of the world. But it was honestly the only time where I could actually get the time to do this. So there you go. Hope that is going all okay for you guys. And we will be starting in just literally 30 seconds. So let me keep on drinking my hot drink. I've been out tour guiding all of today, so it's nice to finally get some warmth in my bones. So there you go. Right, 1 second. Now I just got a thumbs up from somebody. If you guys can hear me and see me, that's great. I think that is what the thumbs up is actually for. The chat doesn't seem to be bringing anything up, so if someone could just drop me a message just to test, that would be great, because I don't know why my chat is not coming up right here. It seems to be taking a moment or two to catch up. We have a new setup here on YouTube, so it's one of those things. Oops, no, that's the wrong button. My bad. There you go. Okay, awesome. Great. Oh, hey, Ronnie. Yes, I finally, I think it's all working slowly. I'm very sorry if you've been trying to message me before. It is definitely taking a moment or two for YouTube to wake up. My most sincere apologies. But hi, I can see messages now. So awesome. Good to see that this is working. And it's officially time for me to get started with this Q&A. So hi, everybody. I think that if you're here watching this, is because you probably know who I am. But in case you don't know, in case you just randomly came across my channel, this is Dr. Lillian Cespedes Gonzalez. It's Lily for friends, family, and travelers. As Ronnie very kindly pointed out, I have a very long name, and it's not fair to put you all through that misery. And we're doing an end-of-year Q&A today here on Travolution Tours, just kind of to wrap up the year, to have a general sense of community, which is something that really matters to us here in the company. And just to, well, also hear from you any questions that you may have, anything that you would like me to talk more about, and what have you not. That is pretty much the purpose of this live stream today. Is pretty chilled. So, you know, there is no specific structure, no commitment in that sense either. But that's how we're doing it. I do have some questions that people very graciously sent me. I've written them down on my notebook. Because, well, several people mentioned, I'm so sorry, I'll still be traveling from Christmas, which I do appreciate. So, you know, again, my most sincere apologies for having to put this on a date such as Boxing Day. And thank you so much, by the way, for the people that actually sent some questions through our mail and comments on Buy Me a Coffee. Just so that I can address them and make you guys happy. And hello, everybody that's just arrived to the stream. We're literally just getting started with the Q&A. If any of you has a question at any point, you're very welcome to drop it in the chat. There are no rules. Hi, Trista. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining. So yeah, just literally, this is your time, guys. Any questions that you have for me, drop them in there. I'll pick them up. We'll chat over. Hey, Ruth, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining. And again, my most sincere apologies for making this unboxing day. You see, I actually have not a single day off until I fly home to Spain, which is on the 4th of January. Christmas is normally quite quiet in the UK, but this year, honestly, it's been kind of bonkers. So I'm pretty much working back-to-back tours all the way until the 3rd. And this was the only day where I had an evening that was more or less free. So this is why we're here. I don't know why everybody is so crazy about Christmas in the UK. I don't know if it's been the same where you guys are. But yeah, we've had 2 cruise ships land in town in Southampton today, mostly from Germany, but we had another one from Norway, I think it is. So it seems that everybody's just very excited to do things in Christmas. And I'm not complaining. I'm very happy. It's good for business. It's just a little bit unexpected and overwhelming. Well, I actually have, like I said, some questions that some people have sent as well ahead of time. So I will maybe kickstart with one of them. Like I said, for those of you watching at home, if you want to drop us a question, feel free to use the chat. I'm looking at it, so, happy to answer them. But I have some questions in here, and I will just pick one at random. Hey, Nathalie, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. And I have a couple of questions from you guys already. My God, you're so fast. And actually, I don't know why I can't drop down to actually read the chat. There we go. I appreciate that you send videos once in a while, and I would like to able... Oh, thank you so much. You're so kind. And yes, you can contact me on info@travolutiontours.com. I'll put the email as well at the end of the... I'll say it. Live stream, but you also have it on the description of our channel, Ruth. If it's easier to copy and paste, you're very welcome to do so. Hey, how are you all doing? My question is only how quickly to get rid of... Oh, Ronnie, if I had the answer, I wish I would have been eating Christmas cookies all December. It's been a pretty meager Christmas here. I actually had a very upsetting moment the other day because I spend normally Christmas in the UK on my own. My family's in Spain, as many of you know. I don't really get to go home until later on in January. And I'm going there, like I said, at the beginning of Jan. And I normally go to the Spanish stall in the Christmas market in Winchester to get my Spanish goods so that I can have a small Christmas gathering with just myself. But nonetheless, and when I arrived this year, they were like, oh, we're sorry, we don't have anything left. Anything of the stuff that I normally take. And I was like, you don't? Why? Why did all of these other people come to take my Spanish food? When did you become so popular? So I literally, all I could buy was some Iberico ham, and that was it. So I went around all supermarkets in the local area trying to find like other bits to make up for my very sad meal. So for Christmas Day, I had my jamón, nonetheless. I bought myself some very nice blue cheese, which is normally a bit expensive in the UK, some nice bread, and I essentially kind of did fake tapas to kind of make up for this fall part on my behalf. Oh, and I treated myself to a very nice strawberry mousse, but it's okay because my mom has put me already on the Christmas diet for when I arrive home, which means all the stuff I couldn't eat during Christmas and that I'm gonna eat between the 4th of January and the 13th. So, it's fine, really. I shouldn't complain. But yes, honestly, the reactions in the chat, it was very heartbreaking because regularly, this has been my thing every single year for the last 15 years. I go to this place. The place is actually called Pure Spain. In case that any of you are interested and you're local to the UK, they do have an actual online store. And I normally don't order because it's just for myself. And, the delivery price for a couple of items is almost more than the items themselves. So that's why I get my Spanish haul at the Christmas market. But, well, there you go. And, well, yes, it was nice. Actually, it was nice. For dinner, I had just some very exotic pasta that I made at home with some random stuff just to break up the routine. And today, I treated myself to a very posh tea, which I think makes up for it somehow. But yeah, so there you go. Well, actually, talking about Christmas, I have a question here from somebody about Christmas. Let me find it. Dave in Manchester asked me, I read on your Buy Me a Coffee that Santa brought you a really cool book. Can we see it? Yes, yes, you can, Dave. I have my Christmas presents right over here. So, because we do, like I said, because mostly I celebrate Christmas when I'm home for 12th night. It's just, a couple of Christmas presents here and there. And my parents, who are absolutely lovely, they brought me this, which is the annotated version of the Ring cycle of Wagner, which on top of being illustrated, as you can see, it also has the manuscript in German and in English. So this is really cool because my plan for this is actually play the opera musically and then go reading. Hope that I improve my German in the meantime. And just, it's actually very nice because it even includes bits and pieces of the musical part that you are reading. So it's not just a historical book from the point of view of having an actual, readable version of the Ring. Hey, Bill, how are you doing? Thank you so much for joining us. It's also the fact that it is, a double translation. I can actually guide myself reading it, and it has the illustrations, which really makes up for it. I am a nerd for all of these historical books that have something quirky about them. When you're a historian and you read so many versions of the same book over and over, the fact that it has pictures becomes really exciting. So there you go. Thank you. I really am. Thank you so much for dropping by. And we are having a wonderful day. And well, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, all that jazz for everybody watching now or later at home. So I hope that is, Dave, I hope that answers your question about the cool book and why I was so excited about this book. Maybe it's not very exciting for anyone else, but guys, this is literally what I live and breathe, just the Middle Ages and mythology and culture one way or another. So that's why I was so excited about this. And actually, thinking about it, I don't actually have like a normal paper copy of like a proper edition of Wagner in any way, shape or form, particularly not a double translation. By Bill O'Reilly, not that I can think of from the top of my head, Bill, but I could be wrong. I read a lot of books, often for work, and I don't necessarily always remember the name of the author, at least not in full. So not that I'm aware of, but it could be. I will check after the stream, see if there is any title that comes to mind, but as of right now, I can't really think of anything right in there. Well, I will actually go back to some of these other questions that people have sent us. So I have a question here from Linda in California. Hi, Linda in California. Sorry that you are missing the stream because you're traveling back home. Can you please tell us a little bit more about your titles? Yes, I can indeed. In fact, I actually, because I saw the question coming through on the internet, I brought my titles out. So I know some of you have seen this already, but so I have a BA, which is a Bachelor's of Arts in the UK. In fact, look, you will see this written backwards, but it's Bachelor's of Arts with honors in history and the medieval world. In the UK, they come with like a little CD so that you have your transcript and all of your stuff in there. So this is what I studied for my major, for my main diploma from 2009 to 2012. And it was specifically history and the medieval world. So it was a very focused kind of baccalaureate to mostly delve into the Middle Ages. I did some modules about modern history and some what we call core modules, modules that everyone that is training to be a historian should read and prepare for. Things like historiography, how to do archive research properly, those kind of skills in that regard. So that was my BA. Then I did my master's, which was not the master's I wanted to do. I actually wanted to do a master's in public history, which is what I originally set out to do. But, well, life doesn't always go according to plan. So I ended up doing a master in historical studies. That is my MA at the University of Winchester as well. And this was a bit different because instead of being a master specializing on like a specific time period, it was more about what history as a discipline is overall, how to find your niche as a historian, how to understand the skill set, the background. It was much more technical in that regards, but it actually really helped me later on for when I started doing more and more work as a tour guide, because all of those technical skills about appreciating culture, understanding things like bias from a political perspective, or things like that, was actually, it turned out to be for the best. So even though it wasn't necessarily the right master's that I wanted to study, it worked pretty well for me. And then finally, we have my PhD with the longest title possible, which, as you can see, this is it, awarded in 2021, and it is Doctor of Philosophy for her thesis, an examination of the representations of medieval Norse women and their modern depictions in visual media. Because when you are a doctor, you must have a long and readable title for your thesis. So essentially, my love for the Norsemen transpired further on my PhD. My MA thesis was already on the Norse, so was part of my BA, and I really focus on Norse women, because when you're doing a PhD, you really need a topic that is like very selected. You cannot have something very broad, because you need to produce original research, meaning you're supposed to come up with some cool theory about something or another. Within reason, you're obviously not going to be reinventing the wheel to some extent, but you're supposed to push a field that is sort of stagnant. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to focus on the identity and culture of women of the Norse civilizations and cultures, what they had in common, and what that said about their identity through art and culture, which most of you who follow us here would know is my jam and what I do a lot of the time. So those are my titles, Linda. I hope that makes some sense, and thank you so much for the question. Oh, Ashrit is in the chat. Hi, how are you doing? I'm just gonna have some water and answer your question just now. Oh, so we have 2 questions. Okay, Ashrit. Any changes happening to Travolution tours in the new year? Sort of yes and no. So this year, in the physical side of business, there was so much work. There were some days I had to be in more than one place at once. So I obviously had to bring some people on board to help me out. One of my key players, so to speak, my colleague Michelle, for whom I'm incredibly grateful, has now gotten another contract teaching in an English international school. So she's not as available as she was this year to help me out with tours, which is a shame, because Michelle is awesome. And if any of you are watching us at home that have done any tours with Michelle, you would know her quality. So Michelle is still going to help me, but that means I still need someone else. So I'm doing some interviews in the new year to bring actually a historian in training into the family. I have a couple of students that are finishing their master's or their PhD, and I'm hoping that we can work together. They can learn on this job, and this can give them, some solid opportunities for the future. So that would be a change in the new year. We're also trying to open some new routes in terms of physical routes, since we're having more people to cover areas. And we're going to try to do some more live events with like historical activities in the local area. But all of this moves slowly. So yes, there are not necessarily changes, so to speak, but like more things that we're doing in there. If that makes sense, Asrith. Oh, no worries. And what is my favorite place to see? Oof. So I am hoping that I can go on holiday in February. I have already looked at my timetable between March and June, and it's ridiculously busy. So I'm not really gonna have like enough time to go on a proper break during those months. And since February is still a bit quiet, I'm hoping to go away. I'm looking at potentially going somewhere in the Baltic or the Balkans. To be determined as of yet. The flights that I've been looking at and accommodation have been to places like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, or Bosnia-Herzegovina and Montenegro. So I know they seem like completely polar opposite ends of the spectrum, but the Baltic countries are areas that I've wanted to visit for a long time. They of course have a big interest to me because of the Norse connection in there. Estonia is such a beautiful and underrated country as well. And actually, well, so are Lithuania and Latvia. A dear friend of mine, some of you would know, Evia from Andrea and Evia in Italy Best, is actually from Latvia. And I've seen some of her videos, and I think it looks really cool. So, you know, I'm trying to figure out if I can make that happen. And if not, well, I've been to the Balkans, but a long time ago, and it wasn't a great experience when I went to Croatia. Nothing wrong with Croatia, just the actual vibe of the whole holiday was a bit off. So I thought, well, maybe I can go back to the area of the Balkans and sort of rewrite that experience. And it will probably be warmer. It will probably be warmer than the Baltics, but, you know, one of those things. So that's one of those. I hope that makes sense somehow. Well, right. I can see there are a couple more questions in there. I will also read one of the questions that we were sent on the I'll say it, internet. Right. So, well, Maria from Spain. Hola, Maria, ¿qué tal estás? I wanted to ask you if you're reading anything interesting currently. You guys know me so well. You know I have like 3,000 books on the go all the time. Yes, I am reading something which is not the book for Christmas. I am reading this. Some of you may have seen this already, perhaps from another chat. This is volume... I think it's the first volume of the second series. So this is by Yin Yong. Yin Yong is an amazing Chinese author. And this is part of the series, The Legends of the Condor Heroes. It's a series of books telling the story of this main character, Wu Jin, who is like a prodigy of martial arts. And it's kind of like a martial arts adventure in a historical setting, right as the Mongols are taking over the north of China. So there is actually a lot of historical flavor to the majority of the books. All of the places that they are narrated in the book are historical regions of China. The landscape is so evocative. I am an absolute nerd for martial arts. I used to do Tai Chi for a long time. In case you guys didn't do that, that's something that I really enjoyed. And I think it's just very nice. In fact, the narrative of Yin Yong has actually been considered to be the Lord of the Rings of China because of how in-depth the world is and the characters. And I really resonate with a few of them. I think they are, you know, really cool characters. So that is what I'm reading right now. But this is like the first book on the second series. So the first series is The Legend of the Condor Heroes. That has, I believe, 5 or 6 volumes. I read that a long time ago. The translations in English take a long time to come over, so I've been waiting about 4 years for this book to get to me, and my parents bought it for my birthday this year. As you can see, it's quite thick, and because I read many other things at the same time, it's taken me a while to actually dig into it, so I'm ready now to continue with my martial arts wuling type of stories. But there you go. So that's I hope that makes sense, Maria. Thank you so much. Gracias por la pregunta. And I don't know if this is interesting for anyone else, but it's interesting for me. So there you go. Oh, Betty, have you visited Cappadocia in Turkey? You know what, Betty? I've been wanting to go to Cappadocia for ages. I've been wanting to go to Turkey actually for a long time. And the problem is that actually the flights from the UK are not necessarily always going to the place I want to go, at least not for a reasonable budget. So, you know, it's the best part of 4 to 5 hours, depending on where you fly in Turkey. And it's often flights that go to like touristic resorts around the coastline. In fact, we didn't even have a flight that would go even nearby Istanbul, not without paying, you know, very, very high prices. And I'm not made of money. I normally try and travel on a budget. So unfortunately, Cappadocia has been eluding me for the best part of 7 years now. But it is on my list of things to do. Funnily enough, Cappadocia was going to be my alternative to Morocco when I was there in November. But the deals for Morocco were simply just better. It fit better my timetable as well. I kind of feel that once I get to Turkey, I want to spend at least a week there to explore different places, because Turkey is so full of history. So it would really, you know, I know myself and I know how thorough I can be. So it would be great, particularly in a place like Cappadocia, to actually have that time to explore. Thinking of visiting sometime in February. I think that's a really good call right now. In case you guys don't know, by the way, this is a hot tip in the tourism industry. There's been some some back and forth with, tourism figures and whatnot. Turkey kind of started receiving lower numbers this year in 2024 because a lot of places in Greece were offering similar like holiday resort offers, but a bit cheaper. So Turkey is actually quite keen to have more tourists, particularly now in the low season, which is not really low season in some places anymore. But I think it would work out quite well for you, Betty, and you will not be dealing with, awful masses of tourists left, right, and center. It will still be busy, but not, ridiculous in that sense. And the temperatures, I think, would be a lot more pleasant in that regards, because, guys, in Cappadocia, in the summer, it can be scorching hot. And in the depth of winter, you will have to wrap up a little bit just because, it can still get a bit cold. But I think you will probably find a better time that way. So I think that's a pretty solid choice. But that's just my opinion. I'm biased because I've always wanted to go. I think this is going to sound really, really silly, but I don't know if you guys were very big fans of the History Channel back in the day when the History Channel still produced history documentaries, not nowadays when I don't really know what they do. And God, I must have been like 12, something like that, or maybe 14, not much older than that. And I distinctly recall watching with my parents a series on History Channel called Ciudades Bajo Tierra, which I guess in English translates to cities underground, or underground cities. I don't know in which order, because of course they streamed it in Spanish, so everything was dubbed. And Cappadocia was one of those places that appeared in the series, and I remember just being like, whoa, look at this. Everything is just carved underneath, and all of these civilizations that went through it. It just really blew my mind, the fact that, people could actually have a full functioning society over there. And not just that, I'm sure many of you probably have seen videos and whatnot. The landscapes around Cappadocia are so evocative. It's a very unique kind of geology that they have out there. So it's just very beautiful to look out, but also just as a cultural place, I think it has a lot to offer. And it's very different from what most people expect Turkey to be, which I guess, at least particularly from the point of view of Spain and the UK, a lot of people sort of think about Turkey like, beach resorts, Istanbul, done, which is sad because Turkey is such a huge and flavorsome country. So I really hope more people engage with that. Yes, the cave dwellings, absolutely fantastic. Oh, I see that we have more History Channel fans, so glad for that. I think you posted another question, Ashrith. I'm gonna try and see if I can find it again. Oh, what inspired me to become a tour guide? Well, it's funny because when I was doing my BA already, I actually started volunteering as a tour guide first in Winchester Cathedral to get extra credits for university. And I actually really liked it. I found that it was a very interesting way of engaging with just people and actually talking about history in a way that is normal. And with normal, I mean without the academic shenanigans that often go in the background of everything that we have to do as historians. Writing papers and articles and whatnot is all very, very nice. But the reality is that most people don't actually read those articles. A lot of academic writing is behind some very expensive paywalls, not necessarily open even to the public. So you normally have to access it through some kind of library. It costs you a fortune. You don't often get a lot for your money. It didn't seem terribly accessible or right. And, in the country where I come from, in Spain, history has always been a double-edged sword. We gatekeep around history. We used to gatekeep a lot around history in Spain. And I think I had grown apprehensive about that for a long time. So accessibility mattered to me a lot already as a student. So when I realized that I could actually do history stuff by just talking to people, I thought, hey, this is pretty cool. And then as life went on, some opportunities opened up. The Great Hall, for example, where I was based for 2 years on its own. And that's kind of how it all came together. I don't think I ever planned for this to be like my career. so to speak. It was like a nice thing to do where I could have my history outlet while preparing my PhD and whatnot. And as I was actually doing my PhD and working as a tour guide day in and day out, everybody was like, "You're so wonderful. Why don't you just do this 24/7? But you know, when you're studying a PhD, particularly in the UK, you're kind of groomed for a position. And I know that kind of sounds weird, but that's the truth. The majority of PhD students, particularly in the humanities in the UK and in the US, are sort of like honey trapped into studying something or another. Universities get money and funding depending on the number of PhD students that they have. And well, when I started, things were very different than how they ended up being. So you're kind of recruited into this research with the promise of a job at the university, you know, educating people, changing the future generations, which I thought was a very noble cause. And well, eventually I realized it wasn't actually noble at all. Everything really in academia, at least in the UK nowadays, is mostly paper bureaucracy and very little time with the students. And I was like, that's not really what I set off to do. So when I finished my PhD and I actually had the time to set up my business at the same time, I decided to go solo. But my career as a tour guide had actually started a lot earlier than anticipated. And I say it today, I'll say it again, this was definitely the best choice for me and for what I wanted to do. I get to do what I love every single day. I get to put all of my history knowledge to use. And actually, I do know that I help a lot of people. Not because I say this, but because people actually tell me, hey, you know, I was never expecting this would be so interesting. So it's you know, that's what inspired me to do so. The sheer comments that I heard from other people to go and do something that I guess I naturally got along with, if that makes any sense in that regards. And oh, okay, Nathalie, how did you become a virtual a virtual tour guide? And thanks, it's very kind, Nathalie. So the virtual tourism thing kick-started properly everywhere with the pandemic. I didn't realize that I had actually virtually tour guiding in the past through Facebook. Not necessarily in the way that we understand now, but I was the typical person that would go to a museum on a holiday, and half of my Facebook feed would be me with the phone explaining to people, you know, at home, people who were not there in holiday with me, my friends, family, and whatnot. This is what I'm looking at, and this is cool because of this, and that. So I had actually been doing that since 2012, more or less, thanks to a blog that I used to manage back in the day that started as a university outlet, which was called WU History. Eventually it changed name into New History and now under the name Travolution Tours. But it started sort of like that, but not properly, like I said, in the shape of what we know it nowadays. And my first proper virtual tour, so to speak, I had given virtual lectures before, as you can probably imagine. But as a proper virtual tour, the first one I ever did was in a platform that doesn't exist anymore. It was Heygo. So I actually set up with Heygo in 2020, 2021? 2020, no. I think 2021. Yes, I can't remember what the years are anymore. It must have been 2021. Because literally, well, yes, I set up Travolution Tours in October 2021. So I think literally within days of actually registering us as a limited company, I started exploring options. And I had seen some people doing virtual tours during the pandemic, but back then I was in the middle of finishing my PhD and I didn't quite have the time for it. I really needed to focus on the thesis. So it became very clear to me that it was an important outlet. And actually, I'm lying. My first virtual tour of this characteristic, I'm lying entirely. It wasn't Heygo at all. It was on Instagram. It was in our Instagram page with a couple of friends of mine. We were doing some food history sessions. And that's how it started. And then proper virtual tours in the format that we've all become a bit more familiar with on Heygo itself. I think the first tour I gave with Heygo must have been in winter 2022, early winter, something like that. And I had been doing things on Instagram for several months already. So that's kind of how it happened. And the reason for it was because, once again, I became so aware of how inaccessible everything had become now, with the fact that we couldn't all travel anywhere, right? But to me, what really mattered was the fact that I had said this for quite some time. I had genuinely said for a long time, with the technology that we have nowadays, we should be digitizing certain artifacts, certain sites, so that people can see them. Because we can't have thousands of people going to every single archaeological site, museum, etc., because it's seriously damaging. I don't think as humans we realize the impact that we have. Even though we wish for all the impact to be positive, it's literally not always so. There are many archaeological sites where we have to restrict the amount of people that go in there because they're fragile or because they've been abused in the past. So I had said this for the longest time. We should use this technology for this purpose. But, I never quite thought that I would be doing this myself until the opportunity presented itself. Now, in case you guys aren't very familiar with virtual tour guiding, up until the pandemic, a lot of the use of, video conferencing and just live streaming wasn't necessarily used for this purpose. There were, of course, travel bloggers and things like that would use their YouTube channels to produce this kind of content, but from a very different perspective. So it's because the platform suddenly became available due to the need of the pandemic that I think not just me, but many of my colleagues decided to take a go. And Heigo at the time was a very popular platform. I think at its height it had over 10,000 users, more than 10,000 users, and many tour guides. But that's kind of how it started. There were many others. And after I started with Heigo, I knew that I was going to carry on doing this because I knew how many people were at home, pandemic or not, that simply could not travel to places because of illness, because of financial implications, particularly for a lot of people that I know in the United States. It's not like it's super cheap to fly to Europe on a yearly or even bi-yearly basis. So it was very obvious that people had a desire to know places and see them, but that they were restricted by the confinement of, the human body and other things. So I was like, well, if I can change it by literally walking around with a stick and a phone, it's not a big ask. It's not a big deal. We should be doing more about that. And it was so very nice. The people that actually continued using these platforms were sincerely people in those situations, normally people that were stuck at home and could literally not go anywhere. And I know that for those people, having a virtual tour anywhere for whatever duration, it's heaven sent. It's a lifesaver. Because as someone who actually has a chronic illness, and people in this channel know it, but if you don't know, there is a video actually somewhere in there explaining the history of fibromyalgia, this condition that affects me. I know what it's like to one day just be at home bedridden and not being able to move. I know a lot of people with chronic illness in my life. I know how hard it is for them to travel even just around the corner on a car, let alone across an ocean or to another country. So I know it's something that provides a lot of value, and that a lot of tour companies and I guess tourism industry overall hasn't always necessarily seen the actual value of it. It's about the community. It's about making places connect with people. People and places should be together one way or another. And not just that, that was, a big motivator for all of this. Another one, like I said, is the sustainability of it all in terms of tourism. We have far too many places entirely packed with people. If I can't reduce the impact by still showing you something, but reducing, the traffic in person, it may not seem like much to us, but it actually does help some of those places. And finally, the other reason is because it's actually a great outlet for people to learn. I found that a lot of people started joining virtual tours, not so much because they wanted to travel, or at least in my case, because being a historian and explaining the history of a place on the spot, it's just another way of learning, but instead of reading a book or, watching it on a documentary or whatever, you have the ability to ask questions and check things in real life, and that actually has become a very useful source of knowledge for a lot of people. I've done tours for students of history that just literally wanted to learn about that place. I've done tours for honestly so many different reasons that I think they're just very valuable from the virtual perspective, of course, and it's something that is definitely gonna still be very important for our company moving forward, and why we try to put as much effort as possible, of course, when we can, and we are not touring in person, into the YouTube channel and a few other outlets. So I hope that makes some sense. I used to travel everywhere. Now, well, so there you go. It can be really really difficult, and like I said, that's just things that simply come with age. I think of my own grandparents. You know, my grandparents would just grab the train from Spain to Switzerland and walk everywhere and see all of these things, and they can't do that. They can do that right now. And I always think to myself, well, why shouldn't my grandparents enjoy life? You know? And like my grandparents, you know, likewise with Ronnie and anyone else. It shouldn't limit us from learning, from exploring. There are many uses of technology. You know, it's one of those things that we're using technology for all of these reasons, which are not necessarily always helpful to people. Well, where we actually have the technology where we can help people, then I think we should do it. And thank you so much, guys. It's much appreciated. And well, I agree entirely, Natalie. The cost of traveling is not a small joke. Even, you know, and again, I say that as somebody who normally travels on a budget. I'm not made of money. As you can see, my furniture at home is IKEA. It's a Kallax. So there you go. But you know, my parents are both working class. My entire family's been working class. Going on a holiday for us was a luxury. My parents would save an insane amount of money and work very hard to take me and my sister and get us to see the world. So I know that it really can be quite an ordeal and very expensive. And there are many places in the world I've always wanted to visit, but I haven't been able to because it is expensive. And you may not be able to afford that always. Maybe you can give yourself a treat and go to a holiday or 2 small holidays locally or relatively nearby this year. And I think, for example, in Europe, maybe it's a bit easier because you can drive for 2 hours and cross a border, if you see what I mean. But particularly the farther away you go, the more difficult it becomes to go to places. Like, I know so many people in the US, and I've never visited the US because the flights nowadays are a lot more expensive. You can't go to the US for a weekend. The longer that you stay in a place, the higher the prices go up. And not just that, you know, there are far too many places. You are never going to have enough time. Even if you have the money, you're never going to have enough time to see them all in real life. So even as someone, not just as someone who provides virtual tours, but someone who actually consumes virtual tours, if I know somebody that I know is doing a tour somewhere cool, and I know the chances of me going there are very slim, I will crack it on because it's an invaluable resource. I know it's not like being in the real place, but if at least I can get a taste of it from the comfort, by the way, of my living room with my many blankets on top and a cup of tea and someone else doing the walking for once instead of me, then, you know, it's I think it's worth the while. So that's how that sort of started. And why I've been so upset this year that the weather in the UK has been so awful. We've not been able to do a lot of live streams because, you know, there are actually a fair few technological items that go into making a virtual tour. The technology is not difficult, but the weather can generally be worse for virtual tour guiding than for physical tour guiding. You know, the phone needs to be on a stabilizer. If there is wind or heavy rain, the stabilizer doesn't work because at the end of the day, it's an electronic component. So likewise, with signal, a lot of people don't realize if the weather is bad, our signal gets damaged. So I may be showing you somewhere, but you may not be able to see it properly, which of course affects the experience. So that's why I've been really upset this year, and why I've done a lot of, for example, recordings that then I've been sharing through Zoom or with a voiceover in YouTube later on. But they matter a lot to me, and that's why I always try to bring virtual content wherever I go for everybody to see. And well, there you go, Triste. So there is a combination of items often that can make things really difficult. And well, right, that's the other thing. It's not like when you have a documentary and there is like this epic cutscene and a massive banner that comes out of nowhere. Like, you know, I'm not saying documentaries aren't great. I love documentaries. You should see my Netflix. Half of it is documentaries. Actually, I say Netflix. Some of the best documentaries are not always on Netflix. You kind of need to use a combination of different providers. But anyway, you know, documentaries are useful and whatnot, but it's not the same exactly than the actual. I'm here right now without any edited stuff. Even when I do a pre-recorded tour and I show the what would have been the stream, the editing literally is just me walking through a crossing and waiting at traffic. I stop and I wait to cross the road and press start again, because sometimes, for example, in busy places like London, you can be waiting at the traffic lights for 5 minutes and no one wants to waste 5 minutes worth of precious tape on just some traffic lights. You know, the traffic in London is actually not that interesting, as much as in some cases, right, it can be part of the experience. But it's absolutely right. You get the opportunity to actually have a more personal, I think, connection to the place, which is very important. And yes, exactly, Nathalie, it is the weather can be very tricky, and I think you guys are absolutely right. It's definitely, I think, though, something that a lot of people haven't necessarily caught on to. And I also feel that this is something that is very prominent as well, only in the English language. Which, you know, again, is not to throw shade, but I kind of feel that, for example, a lot of people are missing out because there are no dedicated platforms or channels to, I don't know, do virtual tours in Spanish for people who don't speak English, or in German or French, Italian, you know what I mean? So one of my wishes for the future is that maybe these technologies and resources we have available can become a bit more international, because I think it matters. You know, I see it with physical tours. More and more people want to be able to experience a place or the knowledge of something in their own language. We are far too used to using English everywhere we go, which is lovely because, of course, it allows us to interact in here now. But some people simply don't have the access to an education in languages, or their language may not be so technical to understand certain details. And I think that's what's stopping some people to actually engage with virtual tours, the fact that they may not be available in their own specific language, which of course creates a barrier in there. And I'm trying to work on something this year with one of my business partners to promote some more virtual tours in other languages, so that we can make that a bit more open for people across the world, because I think it matters too. Oh, let me just catch up with sorry, my YouTube woke up and suddenly threw me a lot of comments. Oh, thank you. No worries. I'm so glad that it is useful as Wraith, because, you know, like I said, and I think everybody's agreeing with it, there is only so much you can do in person, and not always. So it's an important thing. It's fun when guides get well, yeah, right. I'm sure you've seen plenty of those interactions in the past. But again, you know, they even happen. I don't think they happen so much in a physical tour, because I get this sometimes. If people see me talking to like another human being, they think, oh, she's normal. she's doing something here. If I go around with a camera, or well, not even a camera, you know, my phone and this stick to places, and I seem to be talking to essentially no one or myself, some people can be legitimately so rude and so like, oh, what are you doing, or get out of here, even when you're in perfectly public spaces. I will never forget, it was actually a couple of years back. I used to work with an English school, Sky Eng, and all the students were from Eastern Europe in the middle of the pandemic. And this was a way for them to practice English while, you know, learning about the world. And we were just in the middle of one of the ruined churches in Southampton, in Holyrood Church. The church was literally empty. I was pointing the camera right, like, you know, doing my own thing, and this guy came from behind me. This guy, who, by the way, was 2 times taller than me, pushed me out of my way to take a picture when he could have just raised his phone above my head and just told me to get out of the way. And I was like, I'm actually working, even though you may not realize that. And he just proceeded to say a bunch of profanity at me just because I was doing my job. But yeah, things like that actually happen sometimes in virtual tours, which can be a bit funny. But all tours, in person or online, have their own complications. So it's not specifically to the medium. Tour guiding is a job that actually comes with a lot of hidden challenges that I don't think most people realize. And everyone is always like, oh, you have such a lovely job, blah, 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 which is true. But at the same time, I deal with a lot of human beings every day, within my tour or outside my tour. And they are all not necessarily, out to have a good time or to make my life easy. So it can be tricky. I know it generally was like he just wanted to get the picture and everyone else had to go. But it's something that, unfortunately, this kind of what I call entitled tourist attitude is happening a lot, unfortunately, recently. I think because of the pandemic, a lot of people got a lot of anxiety about traveling, and everybody wants to travel as much as possible, see as much as they can, which is fair, but also kind of like own the world and the spaces where they travel. And it can lead to some very unhelpful attitudes, which unfortunately we've been encountering more and more in the tourism industry, but that we hope, and I can reassure you, is normally not the norm. Most people that travel are normal people with polite conversation, the right attitude, etc. But, well, there is, like I said, entitlement is unfortunately one of those things that comes with the job and human nature. So, one of those things. How many in-person tours do you do, a week or a month? I don't know, Betty. It very much depends on the time of the year. But, for example, this week, so considering that we've had Christmas and I didn't work Christmas Eve, and the 23rd was a quiet day because it was a Monday. So today I've had 2 in-person tours. Tomorrow I have 2 more, and I would have a 3rd one if I could be in Winchester and Southampton at the same time. So instead, my colleague Michelle is providing one of them. Then on the 28th I have another 2, and on the 29th I only have 1. So in 4 days I'd be doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tours. And if I count the one Michelle is doing, 7 tours. And this is quite low because it's the winter. Even though it's Christmas, it's busy for Christmas, but it is not normal for the winter. If I show you my calendar for August last year or this year, it can be a fair few. I think my busiest day this year was in June, where I did a total of 5 tours on the same day, and that was my busiest day. The rest of the days may not have had 5, but they would have had at least 3 or 4. So, yeah, I don't want to do the math, frankly. Now that I've said it out loud, it sounds like a lot. It's weird, though, because I have tours of different lengths. So our standard tour in Travolution Tours is an hour and a half. Then we have a 3-hour tour, and then we have like a full day tour. So normally what happens is that we have a lot of the shorter ones, and then we are out in like longer tours now and then, if you see what I mean. But it's quite a lot. And in my particular case, I work with small groups. So it's normally private tours or literally small groups. The largest group of people that I've had in the last 3 years was purely a favor I was doing to someone, which was 47 individuals. But standard, my tours tend to be between 2 to 6 people, normally families, couples, groups of friends, something like that. The maximum I do on a normal tour is 14 to 15 people all at once. That is the largest booking I would normally take, besides this one that I mentioned of like 47 people, which was a favor to a tour agent that I have a very good relationship with. There had many troubles in their I'll say it, particular a business trip this year, and I decided to give a hand just because I generally felt bad, and they are noble people and regular customers, so I did this. But normally my average tour is about 4 people. 4 people with me. In the summer tends to be a few more because of course families come together. But if I average the numbers sort of, thoroughly, it's 4 people. The largest tour I've ever given has been to 100 people, and never again, please and thank you. All of those kind of massive bus tours are not nice because you're not really touring. You're literally herding cats, for the lack of better words. You're not really providing people with information. You're just getting them from point A to point B, which, it teaches you a very important skill of being aware of your surroundings, health and safety, navigation, etc. But it's not really tour guiding. It's just moving people across a busy city. So I decided when I set up the company specifically that I was not going to be doing that I was going to be doing, tours where I could actually talk to people and people could ask things and engage and get something out of it. But that's normally how I do it. Right, a few more questions. Let me catch up. Different languages that help to expand. Yes, well, entirely so, Asrith. I've had this year a lot of requests from Spanish people or Spanish-speaking people because the pound has been lower than in previous years due to the state of the world, right? There has been a lot more people coming, not just from Spain, but specifically from Latin America. So, of course, I've been providing a lot more tours in Spanish this year. I've had several requests that, unfortunately, I've had to turn down because my language level is not up there for French or for Italian. So the majority of people that come to the UK overall are either tourists that speak English and they're happy having the language in, the tour in English, but it is normally big Italian families that normally have elderly people in their family that don't necessarily all fluently speak English that want that. And French, because, well, frankly, it's no news. French people like speaking French. And if they can actually have a tour in French, they will do that much faster than in English, and they will pay good money for that as well. So I've been trying to spruce up my French because I actually understand French pretty well. It's just some technical words that I'm not familiar of using because I've not had to use my technical French for many, many years. So it's something that we are working on, again, to expand the variety of languages because, again, the more that people can engage and learn in their own language, the easier that it is in that regard. Do you know how many virtual tours you did? Well, I can tell you that I will never forget, I think it was January 2022, which was about a few months before Hago closed down. That January, between my physical tours and online tours, I did over 70 sessions. Because it was January, the majority of those were virtual. So I think that probably was one of my busiest months virtually. Now, otherwise, on an average month, I do between 4 to 5 virtual tours for my business partners, World Virtual Tours. We've been working together for a really long time, and we have this format. It works well for us, and that is normally how we operate. Then I normally have a couple of other sessions with another business partner called Restless. Sometimes I have one more, sometimes I have less. So, they normally average out at about 2 sessions. So that's already a minimum of 7 tours a month for not directly my channel or my company, as, providing the services to someone else. And then between the virtual lectures and the actual tours, whether they're live streams or physical, I normally have 2 to 3, sometimes if I have the time, up to 4 virtual tours a week, just myself. So on average, that must be, 3 times 4, another 12 tours minimum each month. I'm now trying to do maths, 15 plus 5. Yeah, so about 20 tours a month minimum virtually. Which again, now that I've said that out loud, sounds kind of crazy. So a few of them, but again, the month where I've done most virtual tours was that January 2022, which was so bitter everywhere, very cold. We did a lot of work from home, and I had 70 sessions, including the physical tours, which were very few because it was just after the COVID pandemic. So that's the one. How far in advance do most people well, Betty, you will be surprised at the fact that I actually received a tour request this morning for the 18th of September next year. Not just that, I actually have a request, and I am waiting to hear if it's a typo or not, for November 2026. This is not normal though. I have found that historically a lot of people book about 2 weeks in advance. But since the pandemic, we've seen again a massive change in parameters, at least on my side of business. It is quite common now. We kind of have two polar opposite ends of the spectrum. People who book very early in advance, and that can be a minimum of a month in advance to a year in advance, and people who will literally book the night before. And the ones that produce me anxiety are the ones on the night before, because normally you're not allowed to do that. Most websites have a very clear cutoff point as to when you can book. But some websites that have like a margin of tours, like say I'm touring between 10 o'clock and 7 p.m. or something like that, will almost literally let you book until the very edge, because the booking system doesn't understand that there is like a cutoff point. So sometimes it can be a bit tricky. And not just that, some people, I think because of COVID, get really concerned that something could go wrong with their travels and they may not get to the place they wanted to tour at. So it's only once they're in the place and they know they are there and they're fine that they book the tour. But this is actually very problematic for them, because what they often find is that they've not given the tour, not just me, I'm talking generally, they've not given the tour guide enough time to prepare. Or they may have wanted to book the tour, but the slot that they want is no longer available. So they may only have, the slots that nobody wants, or that most people don't necessarily want, like 8 a.m. or 7 p.m. And well, 7 p.m. in the summer is not so bad. But 7 p.m. in the UK right now is not a nice time to be out and about in somewhere like Southampton or Winchester. On top of that, not every single city, not necessarily because it's unsafe, but not every single city has monuments that are well lit up at night. You can only do so much if you're walking in a place in the dark and you can't really see what you're supposed to see. So it can be really challenging with the last minute bookings, but they are happening more and more because of that. Like I said, people just panic and they don't necessarily want to book something that they're going to have to cancel later on, even though all of these cancellations are, available. And if you are not able to travel because you're unwell or something happened, you will get your money back. People just don't want to risk it. And there is, in general, again, like I said, this degree of heightened entitlement that has come from a lot of tourists. Yeah, I know, right? From the night before to 20 is a huge margin. I am also very surprised and shocked. But we've seen this, that a lot of people have adopted this idea of, well, I'm on holiday, so everyone has to do what I say because I am a customer. And they just adopt this idea of, it doesn't matter if I book last minute because they will make space for me. And it's like, no, that doesn't work like that. A lot of people, I had actually this very same situation this morning. Somebody booked me last night at 8 p.m. on Christmas Day for a tour today on Boxing Day. We were closed on Christmas Day. I shouldn't have even been receiving a tour request because under any circumstances, I wouldn't have access to my email. My reply, yes, we can do Boxing Day, but it will not be available until 4 p.m. And we need you to reply in the next half an hour because, Boxing Day starts in 2 hours. We need to arrange our timetable. People don't realize that you need to create a timetable to produce your tours. So the reply was like, 4 p.m.? I was hoping for an earlier slot. And I was like, the people that have booked the earlier slots booked 2 months ago. Or 2 weeks ago. So how can you be truly so surprised if you left it to the last moment? Even if you had legitimate reasons to leave it to the last moment, it's a business. There is demand, and there is not always going to be the availability that you want if you wait until the last moment. So there has been a big polarizing effect of people who become really thorough because they have their holiday, they want to book it all, and in case something like COVID happens, it's sorted, and at least they can work with that. Or people who literally will wait until the last drop. But on average, my customers book between a month in advance, give or take, which is actually very reasonable in that sense. Are your in-person tours located in the city? So I do actually provide physical tours in different locations. So my headquarters are actually in Southampton, in the south of England, because we're cruise ship capital #1 of Europe. So every single day of the week, almost, there is at least one, if not many, ships docked here in the city, which keeps us busy. On top of Southampton, I do virtual, well, not just virtual tours, in-person tours in Winchester, which is where I've always been based before I moved to Southampton, and that's where I started tour guiding. And it's only 20 minutes by public transport between the two of them. Winchester being a very historical town, it has demand of a different type. And then I also provide tours of Portsmouth, which is not far away between the other two, although Portsmouth has not become so popular. Portsmouth is a bit more specialized tours. People that go to Portsmouth and want a tour, want to really engage with the naval history of the city or the Second World War. And I also provide tours in Salisbury and in London. The tours in Salisbury and in London normally happen mostly in high season because they require transport. So normally the other tours, the city tours, we meet up in a place and I take people for the tour and that's it. To go to Salisbury and to London, it's normally people who have just gotten off or going into a cruise ship. They are staying in one of these three cities and they want to visit these places, but they don't necessarily know how to navigate the country roads, or they cannot figure out public transport, or simply it's cheaper to hire transport. And then we go there and we come back on the day, which are the tours that normally last a day or two. We're trying to open a Salisbury in-person tour that is not with the transport, so to speak, because normally the day tours that takes us out to Salisbury also include Stonehenge, and I am not the greatest fan of doing tours out in Stonehenge, which is, I know I shouldn't say it. It sounds like I will be making myself out of pocket, but it's not a very pleasant experience for me as a tour guide or for people as tourists. Stonehenge is overcrowded all year round. It's incredibly expensive nowadays. You don't get to do much or see much, and it's actually quite far out of the way because you need to go through country roads. If you even want to take the bus from Salisbury to Stonehenge, it stops everywhere. So it's an awful long time. So we're planning to open a just Salisbury city tour, because Salisbury by train from Southampton is literally 25 minutes to 40, depending on the company that you travel to, so that we can do just city tours there. But all of these things, take time to set up, regulations, etc. But for example, if everything goes according to plan, a return customer of mine has begged me to take them on a day out in London on the 30th because they have friends for Christmas. So this, again, will be a London day tour, but we will be getting there through train. So it can vary, but I actually move a lot in that sense, which is not normal for a lot of tour guides in that regards. Must be extra challenging. Well, honestly, this is such a truth. That is for me such a killer. And without wanting to make this, about the fibromyalgia, one of the reasons why I open bookings such a long time in advance is not just to make things easier for my customers, but it makes my life easy too. If I know the 27th of May next year, I'm here or there. Oxford is another place when I do tours, by the way. I started doing them last year for another customer, which are a Spanish school that trusts me very much with this. But anyways, yes, it can be quite difficult to have something so abrupt happening, because I need to prepare. And even without the fibromyalgia, you need to prepare for a certain amount of tours every day. It's a physically demanding job. In every single tour that I walk, we've actually calculated that now. When I developed a problem with plantar fasciitis about a few weeks ago, And my osteopath wanted to know how much I walk, so I had to figure it out. My average tour in good health and whatnot, with everyone included, is about an hour and a half of walking, and we normally walk about 2 miles, give or take. Between a mile and a half and 3 miles, depending on the speed of the group and the city. That's a lot of miles to walk one day or another, having or not a chronic illness. It's not the same waking up in the morning knowing that you have to do 3 walking tours a day than you have to do 5. You may want to get more rest the night before. You may eat something completely different, because this is the other thing. I eat when I can. When I'm on tour, I eat when I can, normally between breaks. So if I know I have 3 tours, and they are, I don't know, imagine at 10 o'clock, 12 p.m., and then one at 4 p.m., then instead of rushing around like a headless chicken in the half an hour break that I get before the 12 p.m. one, I wait until I finish my second tour, then I have a big meal, and then I wait until 4 o'clock, and then I have a lighter meal in the evening. You know, I compensate this kind of logistics because they matter. Because I promise you, after walking 6 miles at 1:30, I am ravenous. I am not going to want a sandwich. I'm going to want proper food. So you regulate these things accordingly, or you bring more water, or in the summer, sun cream, you know, things like that, which seem kind of secondary thoughts. They matter a lot. I spend a lot of time outside. I may get too cold. I may get too hot. You need to consider all of those things. So yes, it can be quite difficult to manage that. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, with the people that book very far in advance, it's normally people who are booking cruise ships. In my case, so for example, the people who I'm waiting to confirm if it's a typo or legitimately, it's a very exclusive cruise ship. In fact, I think it may be a specific leg of the Queen Elizabeth too. So, like I said, Southampton is cruise ship capital #1 of Europe. We have a lot of cruise ships every day, but certain cruise ships only come specific times of the year on specific dates. I think the Queen Elizabeth, because you know the Queen Elizabeth II goes around the whole globe 24/7. It only has departure points from each port at very specific dates. So if you know you're going to be doing that cruise ship, you know exactly when it's going to be, because at worst it can change a day or two if you follow my meaning. So normally in my case is things like that. People that have booked their cruise ship package, cruise ship companies normally encourage you to book heavily in advance because they sell the tickets fast, and particularly small cruise ships. Not so much, you know, the big cruise ships like AIDA that comes into town with 6,000 people, but a small cruise ship with no more than 1,000 can sell pretty fast. So they do that quite tightly, which, you know, it works well for them, it works well for us, all happy. But yes, it can be challenging, and it can also be, when they book them very far ahead in advance, it can also be a bit anxiety inducing, because I'm thinking, I don't know what's going to happen with my life in November 2026. You know what I mean? Like maybe 3-4 months, half a year in advance seems fair, but so many things can happen in a whole year. Sometimes it makes you anxious because, I don't know, what if I have a doctor's appointment or a friend is getting married? What if I have to cancel that tour? Those things really kind of make me feel, damn, I'm letting people down if I have to move them. But that's normally the pattern. The university students that come here with tours, they are normally not that well organized. And you can tell, because suddenly about 3 weeks to literally a couple of days before the university freshers start, my number of bookings go dramatically up. I have at least a tour extra a day that I was not accounting for. So there you go. Well, you know, Triste, I had actually thought about doing a virtual tour from Stonehenge a few times. The biggest problem is signal. It is right in the middle of nowhere in the countryside in Wiltshire. So the signal is not necessarily great, particularly depending on the weather. Again, I've kind of mentioned this already today, but in case you guys don't know where Stonehenge is, it is in the middle of the Salisbury Plains, which is in the county of Wiltshire here in the south of England. It's about 40 minutes drive from Southampton to Salisbury, 50 minutes to Stonehenge with traffic. Not because it's actually that far away, but because it's country lanes and the traffic is normally bad. And it is literally in the middle of a field that you can't access unless you've walked for about a mile and a half or you've taken the minibus. Because when you get to Stonehenge nowadays, there is a visitor center. You don't get to the stones up front. It's not like how it used to be back in the day. There is a visitor center, you get your ticket. Like I said, the visitor center is about a mile at least or so from where the actual stones are. So you can take the transport bus, which takes you between the stones and the visitor center very quickly, 5 minutes, 10 minutes at most, if there are too many of them, or you need to walk. And in the Salisbury Plains, like the name suggests, the ground is open, wide, and flat. If the wind comes out in the Salisbury Plains, that's it, you're toast. The signal will completely die because all the area around it is very heavy roads with heavy traffic. So there is already an interference from, different devices moving around. And the wind actually makes signal fluctuate or can make signal fluctuate, plus the gimbal. Plus the sheer amount of people that you have in Stonehenge with their own devices, which interfere. Consider that Stonehenge receives about 4 million people minimum every single year in the UK. Do the maths as the average for every day. It's a lot of people with phones, with cameras, with, different devices that can interfere. So it is actually a big problem. But I have considered it before. I thought maybe I could go at low season and we could try it. The problem, of course, that we've had all of this year is that low season in the UK normally means the cold weather. And this year, the weather out here has been absolutely atrocious all year round. But there you go. That makes perfect sense. Well, I'm glad that makes perfect sense. And, well, I do try to keep a reasonable work ethic. I've been told sometimes that I care too much about not giving my customers the wrong impression, which, to be fair, I have learned this with time. I think sometimes as tour guides, we care very much about keeping people safe and giving them a good experience because we know how important it is, right, to have a good holiday. Because I like having a good holiday when I go somewhere, so we want the same for you. But there is such a thing as putting too high expectations, and it can be quite hard to manage. And I used to seriously stress to have to cancel a tour or to say someone no because they book literally a few hours before that. Or sometimes happens, not very often, but sometimes happens that there is an overbooking because, all of us tour guides have our tours advertised in different tour operators or tour platforms, which they don't necessarily communicate with each other. And sometimes it can be that somebody booked a tour in Viator, for example, at 5 p.m., and then in a platform that doesn't have integration with Viator, like either my own website or, I don't know, tours by locals, which don't speak to each other in terms of the software doesn't correlate for the same time, same place. And it's like, so you kind of have to go with a first serve basis and apologize profusely, obviously. But sometimes things like that can happen. And it can be difficult. And yes, I do think our recording may be much easier in that regards, and I have considered that. Again, though, you'd be surprised how difficult it actually is to get to be able to record so that you can actually see the stones. Because as a person who is vertically challenged, because I am 1.54 meters, guys, I'm not tall. When you have a lot of people by the barriers in Stonehenge, sure, you can sort of, jump and move around and you see the stones. But again, with the gimbal, it's a little bit different. I cannot literally put my head in between someone's shoulder and the gimbal with it. It can be a bit awkward. So it would definitely have to be, in the winter months just to make it a bit more feasible. But I will take it into consideration, and I have taken it into consideration. It's also the fact that, in order for me to be able to get to Stonehenge in the winter, it normally means borrowing a ride from someone or getting a taxi there or whatever. So there is a lot of extra steps that take to actually get a tour like that organized. So we're trying to figure out a solution, but it's easier said than done. It's quite likely that any of the other stone circles we have in the UK would be easier, even maybe Avesbury, and I've considered doing that. But yes, we are definitely looking to introduce some more, different locations, even if it's as a one-off in this coming year, because, well, I think it's important as well to have diversity and variety. This it was one place. Well, yeah, I mean, I think you would have enjoyed it a lot better back in the 80s than nowadays. Not to throw shade on Stonehenge or whatever. I may have my personal, political, whatever reasons as to why I may have, problems with the site, and there are many problems with the site. But, for some people, it's an important place to see, and it should be seen, of course. I'm not going to tell anyone how to do their traveling or their holidays in that regards. But it's definitely become a challenging place, even to visit face-to-face. I need to make everyone that wants to take a physical tour of Stonehenge very aware before booking that, again, from Southampton, it takes us a minimum of 55 minutes in high season to get in. And that's not even to the stones. So then we need to get to the stones. Then you need to go around the stones, and then you need to get back out. You cannot see Stonehenge in less than an hour and a half unless you're a really fast walker and you don't take a lot of pictures, which is a big chunk of time if you think about it. It's a lot of time to just dedicate to one site when a lot of people may be in transit somewhere else. So it's definitely a nightmare, that's for sure. But London is another one, right? Everybody thinks that they can come to port and go to London for a couple of hours and come back. And I'm like, you realize that it's a 2-hour drive to London? If we get lucky with the traffic, if not between 2:30 and 3, you realize that you have to walk in London, because you cannot really do a driving tour in London itself. So one of those things, and you realize that London is crowded, so you need to get through the people of London to see the places. So I always try to have alternative routes, and thankfully most people are quite willing to hear you out and to explain that you're not trying to ruin their perfect dreams, but actually, confront the reality of events, which is the fact that your perfect holiday may have some flaws that you didn't necessarily know in that regards. Oh, Michelle is very kind. Thank you so much. It's much appreciated. And on that note, guys, actually, it's dinner time in the UK. Well, a bit late dinner time. I do have a very weird day tomorrow. I have 2 tours in person, which are all in Spanish. Plus, I need to help my colleague Michelle with a very special kind of weird tour that we're doing in the morning. So I need to actually sadly wrap this up and get going, because it's been a long day and tomorrow is also long. But if any last minute questions that you have, please fire ahead while I finish my cup. Otherwise, we will have to do another one in the new year. Because, I could quite happily keep on talking until tomorrow or forever. But, tomorrow it's, we're Southampton and Winchester. I do have a strange break in between. So we need to make it all, fit in. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do it. This is the thing, it's the night before a tour and things that I need to do tomorrow. And because there are some special technicalities that don't happen normally, I'm trying to figure out things that I can't really figure out until I'm actually there in person. So I'm going to be wasting about another 2 hours trying to figure out the logistics of this whole and then go to sleep and hope that everything goes well. So no worries. Thank you so much, guys. It's much appreciated. And I really, really hope that you guys have been, enjoying everything that we've been putting out there all this year and what we are going to put out there. For those of you looking for more virtual tours, by the way, I'm in the process of upgrading my internet connection to supposedly the best internet provider in the UK and in Spain. And when I'm in Spain in January, I'm going to be trying to do a couple more live virtual tours and definitely record a lot more content. If I get away with it, I'm going to be treating you to a very special celebration that we have in the north of Spain, which is a winter carnival in relation to Yule, Saturnalia, and all of these things I've been talking about for the last week or so, which I haven't actually ever gone to. I'm so ashamed of being from Cantabria and never have gone to La Vijanera and Silio. So I've convinced my parents to go this year and we're gonna do it. And if I cannot, because it's in the middle of a village in the mountains, if I cannot get the signal to work, I will be taping this celebration and bringing it for you guys. So hopefully we can see some other interesting things that way. And thank you so much. It's honestly my absolute pleasure in that sense. I've very much enjoyed this. And yeah, thank you so much for everybody that sent questions ahead of time. And thank you for everyone joining us here now and later. And on that note, if I don't see you before the end of the year, I hope that you have a really lovely start of 2025. I hope you've been enjoying your holidays as much as possible. And yeah, wish me good luck tomorrow because I don't know what's happening. So take care of yourselves. See you soon. And it's been my pleasure having you here. Bye bye. Take care of yourselves. Hasta luego. Adios. Thank you.